It was one of the most daring heists in British criminal history.
Hatton Garden would have been a target for thieves for years and years and years.
It's a dream of a lot of career criminals out there. If I had the opportunity to get into a vault.
Jewellery, gold and cash, at least £14 million worth, and most of it still missing.
I'm told by underworld sources that it's 2, 3, 4 times that amount. I don't think we'll ever know.
This is one of the highest value burglaries ever to have taken place in Britain.
A gang of ageing criminals who had already spent years in jail.
It harks back to a kind of golden age of robbery, if you like, in the 50s, 60s, into the 70s and 80s.
A plot that read like a movie script.
This was the one, this was the big one. They committed the perfect crime, but what happened afterwards was a disaster.
This was their pension plan, their one last job.
Sparkling diamonds, their value running into millions, are giving Hatton Garden sleepless nights. With London now a world centre for diamonds, jewel bandits have made this city thoroughfare their favourite target. There have been widespread thefts of precious stones worth hundreds of thousands.
The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Vault was built in the 1940s, the first of its kind, celebrated in a news bulletin of the day.
Nearly 1,000 individual safes are contained within this mass of steel and reinforced concrete.
This particular site in Hatton Garden had been a potential target for about 20 years at least for certain members of the gang.
The 4 men who put together the plot had criminal pedigrees stretching back over decades of notorious crimes. Brian Reeder, the oldest at 76, referred to by the others as the Governor. He was once jailed for a notorious robbery and in the same case acquitted of murdering an undercover police officer. He was found not guilty. He went on the Hatton Garden raid on a free travel pass. It wasn't even his own. Terry Perkins spent his 67th birthday breaking into the vault. He was once jailed for 22 years for a robbery. He's a diabetic and took with him into the vault 3 days of medicine. John Collins, aged 74, his criminal record of robbery and theft stretched all the way back to 1961. On the raid, he used his own car. It was easily traced and it led to the gang's capture. Danny Jones, the youngest of the ringleaders, at 60. Since the 1970s, he'd been jailed for burglary and theft. When he bought a power tool for the raid, he gave his own name and address. In court, he was described as an eccentric who slept in his mother's dressing gown and a fez hat. Carl Wood was involved in the first night of the raid. He denied he was there.
I was astounded when the identification of these robbers was revealed by the police, because they really were old school villains. They all had a background, or virtually all of them had a background in robbery, an old-fashioned type of criminals who, the classic type of London-bred post-war villains.
When I saw some of those names come up, I assumed that they've retired. I assumed that they've moved on.
They began planning it 3 years before the raid, according to evidence found on Danny Jones's laptop computer. It showed that he had been researching power drills. Detectives believe that one of them later visited the vault to discuss renting a safe deposit box and observe the layout. A security guard told police he had shown several potential customers around the premises, but he hadn't kept a record of their details. The vault owners also employed a number of temporary security guards in the months before the raid. This part of London is the very heartland of one of Britain's most notorious crime organisations. In criminal parlance, this is their manor. But were they involved in the raid? The police don't think so. But at least two of the raiders were connected to the crime network, and its name crops up in conversations bugged by the police. It was said on the street that the crime organisation was angry at such a raid on its territory. It was claiming it had property stolen from the boxes and was demanding that those involved gave it back. By the Easter weekend, the gang were ready. The dramatic events of the night of Thursday the 2nd of April start with Brian Reeder using a pensioner's pass to travel for free to Hatton Garden from his hometown of Dartford in Kent. At 8:20, others arrive in a white van driven by John Collins. They park in nearby Leather Lane. This is Danny Jones and Carl Wood. They're wearing high-visibility waistcoats to make themselves look like gas contractors. They walk along to look at the Target building, 88 to 90 Hatton Garden. At 9:20, another man with red hair appears. He's carrying a black bin bag on his shoulder to avoid CCTV. He goes into the building by the front door. Other gang members later referred to him as Basil. Police have never been able to identify him. He goes through to the back of the building and, from the inside, opens the fire escape door on Greville Street. Moments later, the white van pulls up by the door. The gang can be seen unloading wheelie bins, bags of tools and large metal joists. They appear to be struggling with the weight.
There is no doubt this was heavy, hard work. It was bold and daring for them to try at their age, and no doubt they would have benefited from probably having some younger, fitter men involved.
Collins parks the van around the corner and positions himself as lookout in a building opposite the vault. Police have never found the van. The gang carried their gear down the fire escape to the basement courtyard. From the inside, Basil unbolted the back door. Two men climbed the stairs to the second floor, where they brought up and disabled the lift. From the ground floor, one or more of the gang dropped down the lift shaft to the basement and forced open a metal shutter. They crawled out, opened the unlocked cupboard under the stairs, and disabled the alarm. They cut the power to the outer iron gate and slid it open. They smashed the lock off the wooden main door and let in the others. They cut through the second iron gate and drilled through the vault wall, concrete 1/2 metre thick. 3 holes were made. Each one takes an agonising 30 minutes to drill. The entrance is just wide enough for Danny Jones, a super fit marathon runner, and Basil, the mystery raider, to fit through.
It's really a young man's game. Moving that stuff around can be quite exhausting. They must have practiced somewhere else, because it's not just the drilling a hole, it's the setup of the equipment. There's a lot of things to go in to get into place before you actually start to drill.
Unknown to them, the damaged alarm managed to send an SMS text alert, and a security guard is on his way to the premises. But this is where the gang again get lucky. Because of a breakdown of communication with a security company, the police fail to turn up. The security guard checks the front door, sees nothing wrong, hears nothing unusual, and goes away.
Trying to give them credit that you've actually managed to go through the walls, but then look from there, they get stuck.
The robbers drilled through the wall, but the hole was blocked by a steel cabinet holding the boxes. The ram needed to push over the cabinet had broken. They leave and come back the next day with a new tool. Brian Reeder, however, doesn't return. On Easter Saturday, John Collins and Danny Jones get into Collins's white Mercedes and go shopping.
They needed a new hydraulic ram, and this was the first big mistake, was going out on the Saturday and openly buying the new piece of equipment in Twickenham at a tool shop.
They drive around Hatton Garden in the white Mercedes, looking to see if anyone has raised the alarm. Confident their plot hasn't been discovered, they return to carry on where they left off. But Carl Wood, said the prosecution, loses his nerve and leaves the scene.
It looked like whoever had got in through the hole had almost panicked in what they were doing. Boxes were strewn everywhere.
It was completely across the board, from watches to loose stones to finished items to rings, pendants, bracelets, necklaces, the whole cross-section of different types of jewellery.
Just 73 of the 999 deposit boxes were opened. An estimated £14 million worth of goods gone. It was big news.
This via the Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard in other words. They say they're investigating a robbery.
The scene still remains chaotic down there. The vault is covered in dust and debris, and the floor is strewn with discarded safety deposit boxes, numerous power tools.
We've got clients' rings that are sat in there. Half the people there have got their own personal effects along with clients' effects, so that's like a double whammy.
One post-it note summed up the feelings of the street in a direct way. The gang had been careful in the vault and left no forensic clues such as fingerprints, blood or saliva. No camera had caught any clear image of their faces, and there were no witnesses. But there was a growing amount of circumstantial evidence.
A key moment in the investigation was when one of the young detectives on the team was able to identify Collins's vehicle. Once you have identified an individual, you can then start to work out from them, much in the same way as the homicide detective uses the dead body to work out, work backwards from, to see who brought the crime to bear there. And that moment was actually one, I think, of euphoria for the team, because now it opens up other opportunities. You can then start to look at the call data. You can see who they've been contacting. You have a start point for surveillance, so you can actually start to follow them around, see who they're meeting, look at their lifestyle.
The white Mercedes was caught on a CCTV camera in Hatton Garden on the first night of the raid, and ANPR, automatic number plate retrieval, showed it was used to get a key bit of equipment on the second day of the raid. Police found it parked outside John Collins's North London home. Surveillance teams followed him and the car. They saw Collins and Danny Jones together inside the vehicle. Jones, they discovered, had visited the same DIY store at the same time as the car had been driven there. Collins and Jones's phone records revealed conversations with Terry Perkins before the raid. Surveillance on those three men showed them later having meetings with Brian Reader in a North London pub. Police had connected the four ringleaders.
It's almost too good to be true that they would not think about throwing their phones away every time they used them, or destroying their laptops when they looked up drills on them. Things like that. These were elementary mistakes they made.
Members of the gang boasted of how they got into the vault. Police surveillance even caught Terry Perkins showing Brian Reader how they did it and what he missed after he dropped out.
This gang obviously do not watch CSI or Lock, Stock and Barrel, where people use a phone for 1 minute and it's gone. I'm just amazed, actually, with their attitude. They deserve to be caught.
The ringleaders recruited other men to help them. William Lincoln, known as Billy the Fish, stored the loot at his home immediately after the raid. Plumber Hugh Doyle, the gang's drinking mate, let them use his workshop for the loot handover.
You're looking at the possibility of appealing the conviction.
And how likely do you think it is you'll get a change to it?
I hope so. I really, really strongly hope so.
And how did you feel when the verdicts came back in?
I was good.
It was inevitable at some point they would divide up the goods. It's what they will call the slaughter. And that was the moment we were waiting for. And I had said to the team from the outset, that's the prize. And it's bringing them together with the goods that meant that actually we would secure the successful convictions that we have done. However, that takes many weeks.
6 weeks after the burglary, in a series of raids, detectives arrested the suspects. Police found millions of pounds worth of goods hidden around the homes of the ringleaders.
I'm surprised that arrangements hadn't been made to shift the goods very, very quickly, and that was clearly a problem, that they were left with these goods in their homes.
At one house, they found a copy of Forensics for Dummies.
You don't keep clothing, you don't keep gear from the robbery, you don't keep items used. And the way you use your cars as well, you have to limit the evidence that the police can obtain.
In my view, they were very much analogue criminals operating in a digital world.
Brian Reeder got 8 years in prison for his involvement in the 1983 Brinksmat robbery, where a gang stole £26 million in gold bullion at Heathrow Airport. Reeder was a friend and neighbour of Kenneth Noy. They were jailed together for handling the Brinksmat gold. In the same case, they were both acquitted of murdering an undercover policeman, John Fordham. The detective was stabbed to death by Noy, who had found the officer hiding in his garden. Noy was acquitted after claiming self-defence. The jury cleared Reeder when he insisted he simply wasn't there.
Perkins is a legendary name, liked by a lot of other criminals.
Terry Perkins also made a name for himself in 1983 in the Security Express robbery. £6 million was stolen from the vaults of Securicor.
Perkins got 22 years for the Security Express job, and yet he came out of prison some years later, ready to commit more crimes.
John Collins and Danny Jones both had a string of convictions stretching back several decades. These were the masterminds behind the Hatton Garden raid, experienced criminals with solid backgrounds in theft. But in letters written to me from prison, Danny Jones said he wanted to show police where he had buried his share of the £14 million loot.
I want to get back my share of the Hatton Garden burglary. Burmos won't release me to the police. What a load of bull. I'm the only person in the world to know where it is. Deep down, I want to do the right thing and give it back. I want to make amends to all my loved ones and show I'm trying to change.
Eventually they did let Jones out to show police where he had hidden his stash. It was here at this North London cemetery. They pulled out 2 bags from under a graveside plaque. The detectives asked, "Is this everything?" "Yes," he said. That was all his share. What Jones didn't realise was that the police had already found another, bigger bag of his hidden gems and cash in a nearby plot. Police found out when they bugged the gang's cars and heard Jones talking about hiding the loot in the cemetery.
They will still want some profit from the criminality, and even if they're going to serve a sentence, they will do their utmost to try and reduce the sentence to as little as possible.
Jones also questioned why an ageing bunch of burglars would be held in such high security.
Well, let me tell you, Dad's army are like super sportsmen compared with this gang. Run, they can barely walk. One has cancer, he's 76. Another has heart condition, 68. Another 75, can't remember his name. 60-year-old with 2 new hips and knees. Crohn's disease. I won't go on. It's a joke. It's really wrong, as I can't see some of this so-called gang getting through this, once sentenced.
Jones says he wrote to the Archbishop of Canterbury for help in improving prison conditions.
The reply was he couldn't help me, but will pray for me in his next church service. He also said, sorry you got yourself mixed up in the Hatton Garden heist. And finished up by saying, just being famous must now seem like a pretty poor reward. Best wishes, Lambeth Palace.
After the raid, the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company went bust. It had been used mostly by local craftsmen, a small business which had served the jewellery industry for nearly 70 years.
The vast majority of people working here are just ordinary people with ordinary lives, running workshops, making goods.
Right now, I have had about 25% back, and I know they're on the next lot that were found at the churchyard. I know there's some of those pieces that are mine as well. So right now, it looks like I will get about a third back.
People came up to me because of my position in the board. Can you help us? What can we do? And you could see they were quite cut up about the whole thing. They were, they're saying, my life's work has gone. I think the emotional side was as powerful, if not more so, than the monetary loss in many cases.
Police have found only 1/3 of the estimated £14 million of loot. So where are the missing millions? And where is Basil, the man who got away? There's a £20,000 reward for information on him and the stolen goods. The loot the police recovered was, well, mostly the cheap stuff. What's still missing are many loose precious stones and gold bars and coins. That leaves, said the trial prosecutor, somewhere out there in the world, a great deal of stolen property that's been hidden, disguised or sold.
Some of it could easily have been spent, some of it could have been paying off debts, covering expenses, it could have been invested elsewhere. Some of it will just be hidden behind skirting boards, down drains, in attics.
Well, it takes the imagination because it's a one-off. It certainly takes the imagination, a lot of money and so on that we can take the villains, but the villains, they're career villains, they've taken something that doesn't belong to them.
This is how that heist will be remembered. It will be remembered for those few guys who were in their late 60s to their late 70s, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a film option actually being taken out now in the story.
Theirs is a remarkable story, and it's far from over. One of the ringleaders put it like this: when you think about it, we must have been crackers. We got to be stone crackers.